Hello everyone, welcome to today's video where we are going to take a look at round 8 of the Chennai Open being held in Chennai from 2nd to 9th of January. So I was playing in this round against 11 or 12 years old kid from the US. He's currently playing in India because there are just more tournaments and the quality of tournaments is pretty high in India than the US, and his rating is 1940, but as for most Indian players, well, he's from the US, but with Indian origin at least, they are quite underrated. And in this tournament itself, until the 7th round, he was increasing around 132 elo points. So he's pretty strong and underrated. So he started out with d4. I didn't have much games of his to prepare against, but I knew that he's going to play d4. So I played knight f6, c4, d6, knight c3, d5, c d5, d5, bishop g5, and here I played bishop b4, which is I think popularized by Gukesh back in 2022, I believe. And after he played queen c2. The main move is of course e3, and after h6, bishop h4, there's a load of theory like this, but he plays queen c2, which came as a slight surprise to me. But I just developed my pieces, attacking the center first, and after c5, knight f3. Maybe knight c6 was a better move, hitting the center immediately, and after e3. Well, I don't really know what is the best move, but I played knight bd7, trying to go into some familiar territory. And after e3, I played queen f5, hinting at knight e4 next, hitting the bishop on g5 and the knight on c3, because there's this very annoying pin over there. So he played knight d2. I think the main move is bishop d3, and after f5, bishop f5, there's long lines, but I don't remember them. But after knight d2, I played castles, which I think is a slight inaccuracy. The idea of knight d2 is kind of breaking away from the spin, and is aiming to develop with bishop e2 maybe, and also knight b3 and dc5 is an idea. So maybe my best move here was cd4, ed4, and now castles, because after knight b3 here I have at least rook e8 check, bishop e2, and something like bishop c3, bc3, and queen b5. And I'm putting some pressure on white's king because it can't castle there. The e2 bishop is in pre, and maybe this was something I should have gone for. But I underestimated his knight b3 move, and I went for. Oh, okay. Another point is that after cd4, if knight b3, trying to grab the pawn on d4 with his knight, I can just play d takes c3, and after knight a3, this is a funny check, and I take his rook on a1 and promote the queen, since there's a check. But I played castles, bishop f6, knight f6, and I'm really impressed how he managed to defend his position. And here I was a bit confused what to do. I was thinking about queen c7 for a long time, but after dc5, bishop c5, I wasn't so sure if I could have pressed this position for a win much. So, and also like dc5 is his only option. I took on c3 here. He took with this pawn, because if queen c3, then after this and c4, I'm getting bishop f5, knight e4. I'm getting huge control over the light squares, and also the bishop on f5 will look at the b1 square, restricting his either of his rooks to come to the b file, and then I can push my pawns with b5, f5, b4. But he took with the pawn, which is the best move, and after queen f4, pinning the knight against the queen, and so he can't take on c5 with his knight. He takes on c5 with his pawn, trying to go knight d4 next, because the queen will be protected then, and I played queen g4 here. The point of queen g4 is that I'm not allowing him to develop his bishop freely, because I'm hitting the g2 pawn, and so he plays knight d4 here, and I played bishop knight e4. If you are wondering if f3 is why doesn't knight e4 lose to f3, then you can pause for like 2 minutes and think about what you can do as black in this position. Yeah, it's queen h4 check, g3, and knight g3, pretty common motif. And after queen f2 there's knight f5, and after knight f5 queen f5 to there's bishop f5, and I think I'm slightly better in this position, or clearly better at least. c5 pawn is going to fall, and after f, yeah, so he went for g3, but there was something that was worrying for me here. I think I think bishop can't move, right? Yeah, maybe there was nothing worrying. Yeah, so he played g3, which is kind of a good move, and I didn't expect g3 because I thought it's beginning in slide squares, but I realized that I'm not in time to exploit them. And I took on c5, and after bishop g2 I was for a long time considering this move b6, bishop d5, bishop a6, and bishop a8, knight d3, and king d2, rook a8, but I don't really think that I have enough compensation for the exchange and the pawn here. And after f3 I think white is just cruising towards a victory. So I was in a bit of a dilemma here, because yes, this very strong knight on d4, and my pawn on d5 is a huge weakness. But that being said, his pawn on c3 is not a lesser weakness, of course. And yeah, so I played bishop e6, protecting the pawn on d5. I was also considering something like queen h5, and after castles, something like b6, trying to develop my bishop through here. But I realized that after rook d1, something like this, and now knight c6, and this d5 pawn is very hard to protect, because after bishop c4 there's a knight e7, or and then I take on d5 with my knight. So I decided to play bishop e6, and after castles I played rook sc8, trying to gang up upon the c3 pawn. And I think knight e6, f e6, I'm pretty much fine here, but I think it's only white who can press for a win, because I cannot attack this pawn on c3 very easily. Or maybe I can with queen c4, b6, knight d7, knight f6, or knight e5. Maybe I can. Yes, so it's kind of a double-edged position, I believe. But after rook c8 he plays f4 after a long think, which is quite an interesting move actually. And the point is threatening to go f5 and then pick up my pawn on d5, and even sometimes hinting at playing at f6 at some point, trying to weaken my the position of my king. So I played knight e4 with a little tactical idea that after bishop e4, d4, queen e4, that's rook c3, and I was thinking about this position a bit, and after this queen e6, and pawn e6, and e4, I think the 7th rank of white is pretty weak, and since my rooks are a little bit more active than white's, I have some chances to press in this endgame, even though it should be equal. But after knight e4 he plays f5 and bishop d7, rook f4, and already here I found a great tactical idea, which we are going to see in the next 4 moves. Rook f4, queen g5, he picks up my knight on e4, d4, queen e4, is a pawn up, and after rook c3 he takes on b7. So here is a very interesting position, and it's black to play. Black is a pawn down, but you can think for around 5 minutes and try to figure out what black can do in this position, because if it does something very passive, it's going to lose by force. You can pause the video and think about it. Yeah, so I played rook takes e3, and after queen d7 the point is rook takes g3 is there, and after h3, queen g3, the a4 rook is falling. Yes, I'm a piece down, but I do have 2 pawns and a very weak king of my opponents to compensate for it. But after rook g3 I was for a long time considering why king h1 isn't possible, because I was thinking maybe rook d3 is winning for me, but there is this great move knight f3, hitting the queen and the rook, and if rook d7 there's knight g5, and white is a clear piece up. And I don't think I have much in this position. Let me ask the engine actually. So Okay, so queen f4, just queen f4. Yeah, I was thinking about playing just queen f4, g3, queen g3, and it just should be at least equal for black, because with queens on the board, it's very difficult for white to win. So rook g3, h3, queen g3. My opponent went for king f1. Maybe king h1 was a better idea, but I could have given a perpetual check, but maybe I would have played queen f4 to still fight for a win. And I know it's difficult, but there are some ideas like queen h4 check. Let's say he just develops his rook. Actually he can't develop his rook to a decent square, because if he goes something like rook e1, there's queen h4 check, picking up the rook, and rook b1, queen e4 check, and if rook d1, there's queen h4, king g1, queen g4, and then picking up the rook again. So rook g1 is kind of the only move which is quite funny, but after something like queen h4, king g2, rook d8, I'm just picking up the knight here, and I'm clearly winning. It's very difficult for white to defend here actually. So he plays he plays king f1, and after queen f4 he plays king e2, and I played queen b8 here with the idea of playing rook d8 next, or either queen b2 check and picking up the rook on a1. So a lot of weaknesses for white here, and I was mostly worried about this move rook d1, which I thought during the game was the only move, and I had planned to go something like rook d8, I believe, after queen b5, queen h2 check. I mean, really complicated position, but I think I should be holding somehow. But my opponent went for king d3, which I was quite happy to see on the board. The engine of course says that it's still a draw, and here the best move for white was king f3 according to the engine, but I don't see any reason why a human player is going to play that. He plays king d3, and after rook d8 he plays queen e7, and his idea is to go queen e4 next and protect the d4 knight. I played h6, just securing my back rank, and I'm threatening to play rook d4 next, king d4, queen b2 check, picking up the rook on a1. So he plays queen e4, and after queen b5 check, king e3, I played I think a very good move, queen f4. So the point of queen f4 is that I'm still keeping this bean intact, and I'm also threatening to play rook e8, and he can't move his rook, and the only piece he can move is actually his knight. Something like queen f4 doesn't really work because of queen a3 check, I think. And if the king moves somewhere, I can play well, actually the king can't move anywhere, because king e4, there's rook d4, king d4, and queen b2 check, and if he plays something like king d2, then there's just queen b2 check, and if knight b3, I think just queen b2, it's like I have a huge initiative and very hard for white to defend, because if he moves this rook, then I can just simply pick up the a2 pawn, and then I have 3 pawns for a knight, and that's pretty fine for me. But he plays knight c6, which I think is the best move, and after queen a3 check, king f4, I played rook d3. The engine was saying that rook d2 is the best move, but okay, it's very complicated in general. I played rook d3, and here I think the only move for my opponent to survive was, I was actually threatening to go queen d6 check, and if he plays something like knight e5, then I have f6 pinning the knight and then winning it on the next move. So he can't really play something like let's say improve his rook, because there's queen d6 check, and if there's this met, and if he moves his queen, then I pick up the knight, and if he plays knight e5, there's f6. Oh no, not f6, because the queen is the rook is falling, so I can just play rook d4 and win the queen. So he plays knight e7 check, which is kind of a blunder. The best move I saw was knight d5, and I was thinking rook h3 and the knight f3 is the best move here, but I saw that I have at least this draw with rook f3, queen f3, queen d6 check, a funny one, queen f3 check, and his king cannot go anywhere because he has to protect the queen on f3, so he has to go queen f4, and after queen d6 check it's a draw, because if king e3, then there's queen c3 picking up the rook again, and if he plays something like king g4, there's queen d4 check picking up the rook again. So he has to agree to a draw, but actually there's a better move here for black. There's this kind of a funny ladder algorithm with check, check, and his king can't move there because again queen b2 check and pick up the rook. So he has to play here, and now queen c7 check. His queen can't guard the check because there's rook f3 picking up the queen, and if king e3 there's queen c3 check again picking up the rook, and if king g4 of course there's queen g3 met, and if knight d5 there's rook h4 picking up the queen again. So I played so his only saving move was knight e5 rook h3 and now rook g1, which is quite a hard move to find. Like white has to play quite passively, and here I was thinking maybe I should have gone h5 instead of h6 so that after rook h4 check he doesn't have rook g4 move. But I think after rook h4 check, rook g4, there's nothing I can do in this position. Maybe queen c1 check, queen e3, and yeah, maybe I should just take a draw in this position. Yeah? Nothing much to see here. Yeah, I don't think I can play anything here. Like if something like rook h2, then just knight f3 is coming, right? Yeah, it's very, very complicated position. I don't know. And even something like rook g4, queen g4, queen a2 may be playable, but it should be a draw anyways. But my opponent fails to find it, and he plays the decisive blunder knight e7 check, and after king f8, knight g6, fg6. I think what he saw was queen a8 check, and after king e7 he thought he is activating his rook and my king is in the center. But I can just safely play king f6, and there are like no checks for his queen. The only check is queen c6 check, but after queen c6 I can just play queen d6 check and get into a 2 pawns up rook endgame, which should be a easy win for me. But I think that's what he missed. He missed king f6 there, but he plays knight g6 trying to hold on to the position desperately. But after fg6, queen a8 check, king f7, fg6, the only move to win is king f6 of course, not king g6 because it draws to due to queen e4 check, and white is getting some sort of a perpetual check. Queen e6, king a here, here, and it's a draw. And the only thing is that after queen, you can't play queen e8 check here because queen f8 just exchanges off the queens. So you have to play queen e6, and that's the only thing you have to keep in mind. And it's a easy peasy draw. Maybe g6 is there, but queen is b7 check, king here, queen here check, king here, queen here, and I can play queen e7 because there's queen c4 check picking up the rook. So long story short, fg6, king f6 is just pretty safe and preserves the white has no checks and his rook is too passive. The only move for him to survive was probably queen c6, and I mean maybe rook d6 is possible, but after queen e4 there's some calculation to be done. But the most easiest win for black is queen d6 check, queen d6, rook d6, and I pick up the pawn here. If he plays something like rook g1, I have rook d2. If he pushes the pawn, I have rook d3, and if he protects the pawn with rook a1, I just pick up the pawn on g6. And if a4, I just play rook d4 check and pick up the pawn, and I'm just clearly 2 pawns up and clearly winning. So he plays desperately king e4, and I played queen d6. Now king e4, the idea was, I think I think I could have just taken on g6, but okay, it doesn't matter. I was thinking about checkmate here because his king is in the middle and it's not king of the hill, so he doesn't win. So queen d6, and he played rook f1 check, king g6, just a couple of checks, and now there are no checks. And now he plays queen b5, trying to go queen f5 check, but there's a forced mate in foremost here, and that was how the game ended. So pretty decent game by me. I think I messed up in the opening a bit, but later on I managed to play accurately and energetically, and yeah, I'm at 6 out of 8 now, and I think in the first board 2 players were playing at 6 out of 7, so I think white is going to win in that board, and I believe the leader will be at 7 out of 8, and then there are a couple of players, maybe 4 or 5 players at 6.5 out of 8, and then I'm at a pretty decent place with 6 out of 8. So 2 more rounds to go, and yeah, I hope to finish the tournament well, and I hope you enjoyed the analysis of this game, and you learned something, and yeah, so have a good day, night, afternoon, wherever you're from, and yeah, goodbye, stay tuned, see you tomorrow. Hare Krishna.